Welcome to the Peak of Possibility podcast, brought to you by Peak Path Health. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, if you or someone you care about is facing challenges, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to support you on your journey to health and wellness. Welcome to the show. My name is Glynis Franz. I'm your host, and the show is sponsored and brought to you by Peak Path Health. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, give us your feedback. Today, our guest is Garet McLendon. Garet is a motivational speaker, a father, a man in recovery, an ex-con, many things. And we're going to talk today a little bit about life after incarceration, life after early recovery, and when all the chaos calms, what does it look like to actually start living your life in long-term sobriety and some of the challenges that come with that. So thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's just I love this place. I love being here, and I love sharing about those things that some people hit like as a wall, or they think that there's nothing after prison and coming out and the responsibilities and hitting this stuff. I find it sometimes it's hard to really manipulate this into or fathom even the thought of that being possible for a person. Like for me, I didn't start living, for a while. It took me a long time to live, and so and I was one of those guys out there too that I was doing a lot of, I was doing everything I was doing. I was using my own name and stuff like that. So like when it came to credit,
mistake number one,
mistake
sir.
Number
Nobody
one.
knew my real name when I was out in the streets.
Just fraud. I mean, it's not, and it's not like even if I, with my alias and everything out there on the streets, but it was more like that's just when it came down to it, and I needed to make a quick buck, and I'm in my disease that I would just use my own name to write a fraudulent check into my own bank account and all this stuff. So I literally had no, like bank account or ways of credit, or did I even know anything about how important that stuff was in life? Like I'm not out there thinking about my credit score and stuff or that. And another thing too, I didn't think about the importance of even just having a driver's license, a cell phone, a bank account, and being able to keep the same phone number and all this stuff. And it was really hard for me to it was very hard for me just to hold a wallet, a phone, and when I got out, because I wasn't used to having nothing in my pockets, and and not only that, I'm smoking, and so what
was your drug of choice?
My drug of choice is whatever you had, and if it came down to it, at the end, what it was down to is that I was shooting heroin and meth, nonstop, and I had track marks from my ankles up to my neck. I'm homeless on the streets. Any kind of responsibility or is exactly what I wanted to get away from.
Yeah.
My only responsibility was me and getting my stuff, and getting what I needed, that fix,
And how long were you in prison for?
I was in and out for like 15 years.
Wow. And so how old were you the last time you got out of prison?
I was 32.
Wow. So you'd been in and out. I mean, I too was in and out of being incarcerated, and my sober journey started in handcuffs as well.
Nice.
So I can definitely identify with the experience of not having the tools to live like a normal person. I remember when I first got out of prison, I had so many different bank accounts that I had owed money to, and I would overdraw, and they would just shut down the account eventually and put it into collections. I had Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, every major bank that you could think of, I had overdrafted and owed money to. So when I first got out, the only bank account I could get was a prepaid net spend card, because most major banks check your credit, and my credit was 420.
That's good. No.
Yeah, no, it was pretty low, and I just owed so much money, and I had that net spend bank card for such a long time. Honestly, it was only just a couple years ago that I finally got rid of it, because so many of my direct deposits were attached to it. I didn't want to just go through the work of switching it over. But I think it's important to talk about kind of what it looks like when you're early in sobriety, right? And when you first learn how to start doing these simple things that most people have like the design to do. Like most people learn how to open a bank account. Most people learn how to check their credit score. Most people have a driver's license, all these things, navigating all these challenges that seem insurmountable. And then once you get to a place where you've like kind of like adopted this way of living and gotten sober, like now how do you sustain like long-term sobriety, right? Like what does life look like and what are some of the challenges that come up? So my question for you is what was the hardest part of like re-entering into society once you finally, that last time you went to prison?
I had a big cushion, so, using, fraud, my driver's license, all this stuff is that, I arrived at a facility that sort of, and they talked about, you need to get your life on track with these money management classes. And they guided me over to, a bank, and so going to a bank and trying to open up an account because I started working and I wanted to be able to put my money in there and then remembering that I was doing a fraud out of my own, with these checks and all this stuff. So I went back to the same bank. Same bank, like that's what's going to happen. And they said that they would happily, help, but, I have to pay back this money.
How much money?
It was only like $6,000, and I had to pay back this money.
But $6,000, hold on, $6,000 is a lot of money.
$6,000 when you're fresh out of and you have nothing is a very lot of money.
Right.
And not only that is that I couldn't do no transactions. I couldn't even have a card. All my transactions had to be from a window. I can do nothing from an ATM. I had to do everything from a glass. And what I did is I just started following these simple. I just started. I worked. I had a job. I got a job through an agency because I'm a higher control, parolee, and so I went to this agency. I'm making, and I'm happily like, and the thing for a guy like me, I love just being able to work and get up and have this purpose. And so like building this, and while I was while I'm in this place, I was able to pay back this money, and I'm able to start this journey into this bank account, and then I had a job, and I got into like my first tax refund, like doing my first taxes, and they're filling out, and you're filling out all this stuff, and they're like your history, and like I got 15 years of no history,
right?
Like this is the first time I ever done taxes, like this is it, and they start pulling up stuff like that, like did you work here and all these questions, and everything starts coming, and it gets overwhelming, but I still at this point wasn't thinking about a prepaid credit cards, or I wasn't thinking about anything. I still at this moment did not know about a credit score and credit cards. All I was trying to do is as I feel like is just come back into society and be able to have
build a foundation.
A foundation of just having a bank account, and to not only that is to be able to have a bank card that I could use at an ATM or at or when I go out, or when I go to places, and I had to use a checkout, and so it took a couple years, and not only that, like when I wasn't able to get like lines of credit. I wasn't nobody trusted me out there,
What did you go to prison for?
I went to prison for manufacturing methamphetamine, chop shop, sales, drugs, multiple sales. I got a GBI. I put hands on some guy out there, and so like it all just and
GBI is great bodily
injury to somebody, and then it just kept on escalating, and then I just got caught up in this vicious cycle where like and in the beginning like it might have been these crimes, but after 5 or 6 years I was caught in my disease, and and I get out, and it was just I got caught in this repetitive cycle that I can never get out of, and currently and just destroyed any and everything, and like opening a bank, like the bank account and money, like it was like none of that ever. It was so, and not only that, I'm at this place and I'm making these and I'm doing these money management classes, and they're telling you, and which come in play later on in life when you're there and you're not thinking, like when they talk about like, oh, put it on paper, and like what are you buying, and like add it all up, and I it's like all this stuff I was learning in these classes is stuff like
life skills
I put into a later life,
Yeah. So what did freedom feel like when you first first got out?
I never felt free when I got out. You know,
Right.
I felt more like I was free when I was in the inside. You know,
Well, yeah.
growing up inside and being institutionalized and growing up inside the system. Like you're not free when you get out. You know, I was
Right.
everything but free. And
Right, because the structure. I mean, you
that's
know when you're gonna get up. You know when you're gonna go to sleep. You know when there's count. You know, cuenta,
I
right?
mean, like when you get in there and you get on the yard and you program on the yard and you got this structure. Like I mean, it's a lot of similarities into the real world. It's like now I wake up, I make my bed, I brush my teeth, I go to work. You know, I get off work, I work out. You know, I eat dinner, I go for a walk, and so like and that sort of same routine that you get in there. Like that routine living is what makes life so, you know, go on so fast and productive. And like, you know, if you're able to take that routine and apply it out here into the real world, like it really works, you know.
How did incarceration change, or being, you know, a felon, an inmate, change how you viewed yourself? What was your first time going into, you know, a prison or county jail
And what was like how
old were you the very first time?
17.
So 17 to 33, you're in and out of different, you know, jails, institutions, etc. And did that experience at 17 years old of being in an institution, did that start to shape how you saw yourself and how you operated in the world?
Well, the way I like, you know, you if you go back a little further and you see the way that you're raised and growing up and all this stuff, that like it seemed like everybody I hung out with and everything that I was doing and everything all lined up with the route I took.
Right.
You know, and so it was not a surprise. It was not like, oh my God, I'm going to jail and oh God, I couldn't wait.
Right.
To me, it was opposite for me. Like I knew once, like for me,
It's a badge of honor.
It's a badge of honor, you know, like you go in there and it's like you know, and like I, you know, you go in there and like, you know, people and it's and the camaraderie and the brotherhood. And the number one thing is that when I was in prison or in jail, like I'm not drinking and using like when I'm out there on the streets.
Yeah.
Like my head is clear, you know, you're working out, I'm healthy. And it's just the moment I get out from there it's all downhill.
It all falls apart.
Yeah. It's
right.
all downhill from there.
Totally. So you talked about the way that you were raised. How were you raised?
Well, I was just raised around, you know, I was just raised in, I mean, I left the house at like 15 years old, you know.
Same.
And so like, and my life was, and drugs and everything and alcohol and abuse and all that stuff was live and active and in my childhood. And so like, it was like, and it just boom, like it took me, once I got fully engaged into the drugs, it just took me off, and I stayed out there, you know, getting loaded and living in that life of drugs and the streets. And I loved being out there in the streets. I loved the rush, I loved the commodity, I loved the commotion, I loved the high intensity, I love that, you know, way of living. You know, that's what I was accustomed to.
A friend of mine said once that you have to detox from the lifestyle, right?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely
so
right.
you're detoxing from the substances, but also there's a little bit of excitement in all the chaos, right? It's fun. You're connecting with people until things get to a place where they're no longer manageable. And usually that manageability point is long before we ever realize it, right? But you get to a place where you're like, okay, you know, people aren't fucking with me anymore. I can't get my money up. I can't get enough drugs in me to like stay high, right? And I start to feel all these feelings I'm trying to avoid, and that's kind of the point for many where it's like, okay, this isn't working. And for me, even when I hit that point, I continued to use for many years, you know, further.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, I stayed out there, and you're right. It's not like the drugs were calling. It was more like the streets were calling to me. And then every time I went out to the streets, I get out, and everybody would be like, "You're free," and I didn't feel free. And then I get out there, and it wasn't like the drugs and alcohol that were calling me. It was the streets, because that's what I grew accustomed to living. You know. And
do you remember? I'm sure you can identify with that feeling when you've been locked up for a while and you get out, and it's like an overwhelming sense of like anxiety, like almost a pit in your stomach, right? Like you like go outside, you see the sunlight, you smoke your first cigarette, you know what I mean? And it's like you get lightheaded.
I do relate to that cigarette.
And you're just so excited, right? And the excitement happens at first and it feels so good, and then it gets to a place of like complete, and at least for me, complete and overwhelming like fear and anxiety. Like, oh my God, like where am I going to live now? Like I have to go to probation, to drug test tomorrow. How am I going to get there? I don't even have a debit card. How am I going to pay for, a room or a sober, like everything starts to pile up, and it becomes almost like insurmountable is how it feels, or how it felt for me.
I really, like, I never felt, I get off that bus with that $200 gate money, and like, I would just take that, I go to the nearest liquor store, get me a bottle, and drink it all the way back to my neighborhood, and then I would just stay there, and that was just like a gateway. It opened it up, and I wasn't lasting out there. I wasn't on the, there's only in that stretch of time, from 17 to 33, like the longest I was out was like, there was a time when I was from 2008 to the beginning of 2009 that I was out for like 5.5, 6 months. It was the longest I ever been out. And like I ran my life and everybody's life into the ground. And that was, and that was a time when I got, all this check fraud and all this stuff was going on. And like, and not only that, like I used to tell myself, like, man, I just need to get a driver's license. Like I had lost, I had 168 traffic tickets. I lost more cars than people owned in a lifetime. I just, just charge it to the game. I just be like, take it, and so like this, this ways of living out there. It's like, I didn't know how to live out there.
You didn't know how to live.
I didn't know how to be responsible and live. And there's time after time and people today that gave me opportunities and chances and stuff like this. And I didn't know what they're, these people are just being kind, and like maybe, and then seeing like there's something inside of you that I didn't see in myself, and they're like constantly just like, hey man, here's a job, here's a vehicle, what can I help you with? Let me fix you with your teeth, I go out, man, and it seemed like what I did is I wobbled this fence all the time. Like I really wanted this other side of life that people talked about, and I see people living. Like I really wanted to be this responsible, parent and person and all this stuff, but it seemed like, man, like that, it's from a young age, I was addicted to that night, that street, that just running around until the thing come up, and I couldn't knock that off. And sooner or later, you have to choose what side you're going to be on. And I always chose the opposite side. Whatever the other cost was, it didn't matter about the upbringing and all this stuff. Like I always chose, man, the other side. I always fall to the greater end. And I knew that. And after a while of getting caught in this cycle, I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I knew exactly. Like I knew exactly when I got out, and I take a drink, hit or fix, and like I knew exactly. Like I sit there and I know exactly how it's going to end all the time, and it's going to end with me getting locked up, because I'm not, I go to, even if I tried my best to make it to that little parole meeting they have at the parole office, that you got to check in first thing. It's like a group of everybody who got out for the whole month.
And now you're all meeting up.
Yeah, we're all meeting up with all these people. Hey, I'll go with you. Let's go. It's all bad, and it's all bad from there, and
oh my God, or being on the bus with being in the tank about to be released and going out with the people you're released with. I've been there.
Oh man, I want to make it home for a couple weeks sometimes with the people I met. I'll just go,
Totally.
Come with me, and I'll be like, let's go,
Right.
and yeah.
So do you think that people who grow up without, maybe a firm foundation, or who are a part of this, chaotic lifestyle at a young age, especially as, teens, preteens, maybe they don't have parents that are as present as they should be, or maybe there's alcoholism and addiction or abuse, or, they're in the streets, right? Do you think it's possible for those people to find another path?
I do. I
mean, you're proof of it. But
Well, this is that thing, and maybe, and it's this is my opinion, but yeah, I do think that people with these that people who grow up in these unstructured environments, like I was in an unstructured environment, really didn't have no rules, or even not even did I have no rules. I had no, like, like if anything happened, I didn't have no repercussions or accountability to anything that was going on. And so you get locked up, and you learn this, you learn this cycle and stuff like that. And I really think that the people, like, now I'm so structured, and there's so much structure inside of it that and I really think that a structure is really an accountability is what you try to flow or just be the example of that consistency and the structure and of like what you want, how you gonna get it, man, like that consistency and the
Goals.
structure or what and goals and the
This
structure.
is my goal, and these are the steps
These
I
are the
need to
things.
take.
I'm gonna review it. How do I get it, man? I'm gonna make a map of it. I'm gonna put it on my wall. I'm gonna look at it every day. I'm gonna drive for that, and it's no different than having a release date up on your wall, and you're like, what are you doing for every single day? I'm like, I'm making my bed, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm following some rules, I'm working out, I'm doing all this. What for this release date? And now it seems like you change that perception into a bigger, now it's a house or maybe a boat and
now
all this other
release
stuff.
date is really a sense of freedom on the outside, internal freedom. How do I get internal freedom? These are the steps I need to take, right?
That release date is what the thing that you're telling yourself in your mind is that thing that you come to believe in, to not think about nothing else. Because, like you can either be out there living on the streets or you can live inside the prison where you're at. And so that, you have to live, you have to be present where you're at, and that goes for out here in the real world. You have to be present where we're at. We have to live where our feet are at, and
also I think there's also a piece too for people who have been incarcerated or just people in early in recovery who have never been incarcerated or are trying to get sober, right?
Mm-hmm.
One step at a time. It's so cliche, but I think when we have a list of things that we think need to be accomplished right now, tomorrow, it becomes overwhelming. And just like really breaking things down in simple, like actionable items that are attainable. Like today, I remember I had to get my license too, and I hadn't had my license in 10 years. Did
you had it before and then you lost it? And
yeah, I had it. DUI. I had it when I got a DUI when I was a teenager, when I was 14. So I couldn't get my license till I was 18. Then I got it, and I got a couple DUIs, a couple drug charges, a bunch of stuff, right? So I'd moved to Texas and then eventually Texas to California. I had not had a license since. But what I learned is that I knew my Massachusetts license number by heart. And when California would look it up, my name would pop up, but it would not show them that it was suspended. So for 10 years, I didn't have a license. And when I finally got sober and I finally got out of prison that last time, I knew I needed to get a license. And there was all these steps I needed to take. First, I didn't have a copy of my birth certificate. Just getting the birth certificate was like,
that's another hard one. Social Security card.
Had to get my Social Security number.
That's like,
right.
Wow.
Then I had to get a copy of my driving record from the state of Massachusetts. And then I had to pay off all the fines, right? And at this point, I don't have a license. I'm taking the bus to a job that pays, $14 an hour, not rich. I don't have a phone. And so I like get enough money together. I pay off the fine and then and that took a couple months. That was my goal. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to stay sober and I'm going to save enough money to pay this fine. Okay, then I finally attained that goal, right? Okay, fine's paid off. Now I have this like little driver's record report that I need, and I've gotten the Social Security number and the birth certificate. Now I need to go to the DMV, and like all these steps, I just had to take it like eat the elephant one bite at a time. And just that one example was really a model that I was able to use for all these other aspects of like living life. Like I didn't know how to build a resume either. I didn't know how to do my taxes, and I had to humble myself a lot and ask people for help. Hey, I've never done this before. How do I do this? Like, what's the next step? How do I get a cell phone in my name? You know what I mean? They need a credit check. Well, that's not going to work. So how to, I just had to really kind of be gentle with myself and be patient with myself when I was, first coming into recovery. My question for you is how many years do you have sober now?
12.
Congratulations. That's amazing. And how has your experience in long-term recovery shifted from those experiences when you were newly sober? Like how's your understanding of recovery changed and sobriety over these 12 years?
My understanding, I just think that you never stop growing. I love this saying too, like my only definition in a way I could break it down in recovery and even in about just regular life is, are you willing to let somebody show you something that you already know how to do? And what I do is I got this mind that tells me that I already know, I can do that. Like I know how to do taxes, I know how to get my driver's license, or I know how to do this job or anything like that. And the thing is that I don't, man. Is that I came in here because I didn't know how to live life, and I just because I got amount of time doesn't mean I know how to live life. And I got to continue to relearn and rethink and change my mind and it's this head of mine that I'm constantly like and it's me that's the problem, and that's what they say, and I got to constantly like just sort of center myself and be where my feet is and be constantly willing to learn something that I already know how to do. And like you just talked about, man, I got to be willing to ask somebody for help.
Also see a different way. Sometimes if you know how to do something, there could be another path to achieving that same goal that might be more effective.
Yeah, but my pride and ego, see what happens is our pride and ego gets in the way, and I don't want to listen to somebody because I think this is right, and I don't. And
that's
man.
That prison mentality,
and
right?
And it's that prison mentality, and it's not even, I don't even know if it's a prison mentality. I just think it's definitely a mentality that people have, that they really think that even now after 5 or 6 or 7 years or 3 years that things change, people change, and you have to sort of restructure yourself and to live in and your values and all this stuff, and a lot you're changing. And the thing is too is that for me, I'm a constantly changing human being. I'm constantly growing. I'm constantly changing, and so that means the things that I that I think I know I have to like revamp and reimprove and be willing to learn something new that I already know how to do. And I have to ask people questions like and it goes farther when you get into like like now that that money is really not the problem, and you get into the your credit scores and like and all that stuff, like it's like now it's in a whole nother bracket of like learning and like, man, do I even like, how did I get here? Do I even belong here? Like
right.
it's a lot.
The imposter syndrome
and
can be
imposter
very
syndrome
real.
at its finest, and being uncomfortable and really and asking questions and still not understanding and having to go back and learn and read and educate yourself on this stuff. And like like I remember when I came to a point in my recovery when I was in a treatment facility that I will never get a driver's license. I was like, I'll be better. I'll just get a nice car and drive that. And I went to the DMV and they thought I was straight retarded. Like they thought I swallowed so much drugs when I got pulled over and they did that test on me that I was gone.
Right.
And when I went to the DMV to take that test, they gave me a list of classes and Caltrans and this, and I had to go and see a doctor and all this stuff. And I remember calling my sponsor, man, and I was like, dude, this is just a tall order. Because what happens is that when I get too much stuff on my plate, and even to this day, the stress, the anxiety, all this stuff, when I start looking at all this stuff I need to take care of, and and it's like it gets overwhelming, and and until to this day, like if I get too much, I'm a mover. I still like moving around. I still like I'm high energy. I like moving around. I don't like doing all this stuff. And what happens is that I have to, and I'll never forget, man, and I'm complaining about everything that's on my plate. And about how I can't do it, and I get this negative mindset over all of it, and he just told me, and still to this day, man, he's just like, well, why don't you just pick the one thing you can do off that, and just start there.
Right.
And today, and today, what I do is I just start with that one thing I can do, and I start there on that.
So you talked about being present. How do you stay grounded in long-term recovery? Like, what are the tools?
Oh man, I just my grounded. I was out riding my motorcycle. I was riding with these guys, and we're in this beautiful like forest, trees and water, and pretty spent, and I'm beat. And I get off my bike and I lean up against this rock and I ask these guys, I'm like, man, what is it? Like, how you guys not exhausted like me right now, And this one guy told me, he's like, well, I do yoga. And I don't know if he was lying or not. But I secretly got involved in the yoga and then, and the stretching your body and
secretly?
All this stuff. Secretly.
You don't
I
want
got a private
anybody to know?
instructor. I wasn't going to go to class. Wasn't going to tell none of the guys I hang out with or anything like that. But I got mats. We met at my house and we did it. But this is the thing is that when this person, I thought up to this point I knew what prayer and meditation and all this stuff is. And they talk about this seeking. And I figure that I've been seeking. I've been doing these prayers out of the book and on my own and all this stuff. And I think and and this person asked me, they're like, do you want to do more meditation or more prayer? And just one day I was like, I like to do more meditation. And I went into this silent meditation where I was able to be alone with the one person I've been trying to run from the longest time, and that was me. And I was able to sit there, and I was able, and then so I got into this meditation of just being in the moment, and as things progressed in your life, and I'm into that book. I live by that book that and it talks about that relationships, and it talks about seeking, and what I did is that when the time came is that and big things happen in my life. My parents die, my mom dies, my dad dies. This stuff happens in your life that it sort of like brings you closer and to more in depth and to that seeking. And today what I do is I have a routine every single day that I go to. Number one is that I remain grateful. Every morning I read as it's suggested out of this book, and I do this prayer, and I actually pray, I meditate, I do a gratitude list, and it grounds me for the day, and it's not so much, it's just getting out of my own way. Getting out of my own way, man, every single day.
What was it like? How did you handle some of these losses in your life?
Oh man,
in sobriety,
I
right?
was so in sobriety, and I'm so
because that takes a lot of people out.
I destroyed relationships, and when I was out there in my disease and doing all that, and I'm gonna tell you, there's and rebuilding those relationships that you never thought were possible to rebuild, or like is something that it's not about money. It's about consistency, and it's about your time that you're willing to invest in it. And I'm gonna tell you that I was so glad that somewhere down the line that I found and started searching and seeking this God of understanding. So when something so big happened to my life, I wasn't looking then. Like when this stuff happened in my life, the God was present, and God was there, and it was full on support of me. And what I did is it got me. So I didn't run. I never thought about a drink hit or a fix. I never thought about running. And what it do is it had me to where I was able to sit there and be able to walk through all those feelings and emotions and stuff that I never really thought or could walk through before in my life. And so and I got to sit there with the one person I was able to run that I ran from. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't like this uncomfortability, all these emotions, and cry. You sit there. I'm crying in bed you're going about your day. You're still working. You're still going about, and everything. You still have to take care of all your responsibilities. And at night you're not eating. You're not sleeping. You're laying in bed, and it really felt like too, like I was so hard of of this guy, this man. Like it was so hard to just cry and let some tears out, and then finally, like some tears and are just able to come out, man, and you're just able to let it out, man. And I never thought about taking a drink, hit or fix, and do any of those big things that happened in my life, because I built this foundation, that didn't allow that to happen.
Wow, that's inspiring. I know grief and loss can be a really
it takes you out. It's
yes.
It's a hard, it's a tough, it's a very big, and then one of the biggest things is that there was other examples of people that walked through it too, and I really didn't, like, people just didn't, like, I really felt like I'm a big pillar, and a lot of people lean on me, man, and that at these times it was like vulnerability, and that these people let me fall on them, and they didn't let me. They wouldn't let me, man. I still suited up, and I still showed up, and I still spoke at, where I needed to speak at, even though on the insides I was crushed, because it's just some feelings and emotions. All you're just, you're able to, and being able to walk and identify and grow that. And I love it, man. You grow through what you go through around here, and you're able to grow through, and it gets I'm gonna tell you, this is a real big thing too. Is that they talk about like this. They talk about like these, like, a couple things. They talk about like how uncomfortable it is. The most uncomfortable point in my life is always just before a surrender. Like and then I'm gonna tell you, like, the next thing is that how comfortable it is after I have surrendered. And the thing is I always forget about number two. Right. I'm always the most resistance. It's always my resistance, and I get going, and like for me, it's this. I say this, and I don't know, if bleep it out or not like this, but for me, like if I had done an honest and thorough third step, then what is the problem? What is the problem? You know, The problem in everything in my life is I take my will and I think I know better, and I don't know better. I don't know how to live, and so I need somebody to help me live that life,
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have kids.
Yeah, I
How
got
many?
kids. I got 3.
3. How old are they?
I got a 22-year-old daughter who is a 9 and 6. I'm a full-time dad to a 6-year-old. Full-time dad. I love, and there is nothing more. There is for me. I just at this maybe this is being at the point in my life. I just love and enjoy having my little best friend and dad and being a dad around. It's the best. It's the best. And I think that all that stuff that I could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours about trauma and this and that and the way I grew up and how bad it was and all this stuff and the parents and this and the childhood and all this stuff. And I say that having kids heals all that stuff that you think was wrong with you, and I'm just living proof that, like, having this kid and being able to love him unconditionally and letting him love me unconditionally and having this relationship with these kids and stuff like this is just the most like authentic and healer of all things going on in your life, man.
So your 2 youngest have never seen you use.
Never.
You've been sober through the entirety, but your older one
full on saw me all through the disease.
First decade of her life.
First decade of her life saw me through. I was just out there, man, and she knows, and that's Daddy's little girl, and I love her, and that man, and I was just out she invited me out. She just had her last presentation in college, and I went out there, and you dads, we never stop dating our daughters, and I pick her up, and she drives us in her car over to the college because she has the parking pass, and I go on campus, and while she goes over there to do her to practice for the presentation, I walk inside the classroom, and I meet her professor, and I let him know, I'm Melissa's dad, and she starts sharing about how great and wonderful and stuff she is, and then she's like, you're a dad. She's like, let me get this right, and she's like, you just did a big run, earlier, this year.
You're a runner?
Yeah, I do do a lot. I love.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
What race did you do?
I just did a Spartan Beast. And at Snow Summit, and it was. And so that the professor's like, the professor was like, you just did this big race and stuff, and she says it, man, and she just says, yeah, your daughter was so proud of you for doing that, I love and run, bike, swim. Now, this year is going to be my I
haven't done an Ironman, but I'm a marathon runner.
Let's go. If
I'm
you need somebody to go with you, let's go.
LA
let's go. I'll run with you. Let's go.
I'm going to do an ultra. That's
let's
my
go.
next
I'll
goal.
go with you. Let's go. Let's
let's
go.
do it. Let's run together.
Go. Yeah, I love and I got in it, and that's another thing that changes and stuff, and I'm gonna tell you, like, when doing a big race like that and into those, like, it was like, it's not so much physically, it was knocked down, but mentally,
yep.
I'm gonna tell you, the mental space when you get past like a 2 or 3 miles or even 1 mile, but like when a 13-mile high endurance, high elevation, I was going from 2,000 elevation to 7,000 elevation and peaks, and like I'm talking like, man, I was physically nothing, but mentally, that mind, and that's what we get here, and we get to work on this mind, and I love running, and I love doing that stuff that challenges my mind, man, and yes.
With your daughter, was there a lot of guilt to work through for your inability to not show up?
All that stuff decade? You work out with the person that you call to be your sponsor, man. The only thing I had to do is I had to show up. And I had to keep on being accountable and just show up. And I'm going to tell you, like, not everybody gets the relationship you get. You're not everybody, that they don't always come back. They don't always, forgiveness is not always there. But I'm going to tell you, I just kept on showing up. And when I told her I'd be there, and to this day, when I tell her I'm gonna be there, and open and honest and willing relationship to where and maybe and I did, and at first when I was definitely, and especially you start making some more money, and so you sort of just like overcompensate for whatever for all this last time, but his dad's little girl, so
yeah, nice. So what did rebuilding require that surprised you?
A whole new thought process. A whole new what
Whole new set of ideas.
A whole new set of ideas, a whole new way of, it's not just a whole new way of living, it's a whole new way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't be living on my old ideas and my old way of thinking that I'm going to get somewhere. Like, I have to change and everything. And when they talk about everything has to change, everything has to change. And I'm at a constant, like, and it might not have to be yet. But I'm gonna tell you that if you want to grow, or you're gonna go, man. And if you, it's cool. Like, I mean, and it's for everybody. For a person like me, I had to work, and I constantly have to work on changing everything. And that it's my resistance to change. That one little thing that will
a little bit more willing to do things that feel scary,
uncomfortable, scary, like
or foreign, new.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I've never.
Yeah.
Done this.
I didn't start traveling. I didn't start traveling. I didn't start doing nothing until I started living this life. I didn't start traveling the world. I didn't have no hobbies. Everything that I learned in this new way of life, I have learned inside his rooms, And so it has taught me a new way of life, and it keeps on getting better, like beyond like it. And it's, man, I surf all around the world. I motorcycle all around the world. Like I live and do and travel these places, and like. And it's just, and it keeps on getting better.
Yeah, you're doing Ironmans, motorcycling. You're a parent. I mean, you're helping other people. You're a business owner. I mean, you're
living
totally different. Yeah, you're living life, right? You're in the stream of life, which is like really, if nothing else, like that is the opportunity that most non-alcoholic, non-addict people have. When you're addicted, your whole life becomes consumed by drugs and alcohol, and like. That is your purpose. That is your passion, and that is your hobby. It's your career. It's all the things. If you drink and use the way that I drink and use, and the way it sounds like you drank and use. So when you get sober, okay, the very bottom line is like just getting separated from the substances you're using. But then you realize that you get this opportunity to really start to experience the world and the people in this world, right? To have an experience, to have meaningful connections with other people, to I never knew that I was a runner. Now I'm running 2 marathons a year. I run every week. I have a whole gang of people that I've like put together and we're training, and it's like such an inspirational thing. I didn't know I liked hot yoga either. And now I do hot yoga, every week with my husband. I didn't know that, you're a surfer. I'm sure that you weren't surfing much when you were in the streets. Yeah. Who wants to spend a couple $100 on a surfboard and a wetsuit, right? When you can go buy a little 10 and 2 and hit the pookie pipe, right? Like, you know what I mean? You get to like really connect back to the things that give you purpose and meaning. And a lot of the things that have really given me purpose and meaning and made me feel connected, and it sounds like this is similar for you, is like moving my body. Like I had never really like moved my body and gotten active unless I was sober. You know what I mean? And I'm able to kind of like appreciate like the high that you get when you're like out there.
Endorphin rush.
Right.
Yeah. I like a lot of it too. Was just like when I was out there, I was spiritually, mentally, and physically bankrupt. And coming into this side of life, I sort of getting all this stuff back. Mm-hmm. And instead of me running away from stuff, I'm hitting it head on. Mm-hmm. And like, you can't, you can't create a new life with all that old stuff. And so you have to, and I think hobbies are like a very important thing for a person to have early in recovery or just getting sober. Like you got to have like this outlet or what you're doing. Like a lot of people go to the gym, maybe people do yoga, you ride motorcycles, but like you really got to have like this little bit of, you got to have a little thing to get out there. I mean, work and stress and outlet, you got to have something in life, and you got to, and the outlets, could change. You got to have maybe multiple outlets of ways like this. You can't just be consumed by life. Right. Like what's the use of creating a life that's just like a life without no outlets in it?
There's a beauty about having a job and a career and being employable, and then also like having some play. Like you have to balance that. Your spiritual life, your work life, career, money, and then also like that creativity or that that thing that brings you joy.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all of those
and
things.
another thing too is that you get to find what that really is, because a lot of us coming in here, I didn't know these things that about myself that I really love, that the surfing and the sitting on your board in the water watching the sunset, or being on a motorcycle watching the sunset, or like you don't know these things about yourself,
Yeah, you
man.
get to get curious and
the thing
explore.
is I had to go out and try all these different ideas and all these and until I figured out what really worked for me, so I can have this outlet and feel good. And and the thing is too is as I found that out with doing stuff with other people, and like and it just helps you. And it's the number one thing is I get too much of me on me all the time, and I had to find outlets that that get rid of me and gets me out of the moment, and it gets sort of me just my feet planted and grounded into like the most, and that's the moment now that we're living in, like I come in here, we share our stories, and I love, and we talk about this past and how horrific and how much our life changes, and we get to talk about how like if you stay around long enough, you get to talk about all this good stuff that happens too. Like before, man, I didn't have a story after. Like all my stories ended like getting busted, getting out and getting busted, getting out and getting busted. Like I have all these dope tales and drug house, and all
There was
these,
no happy ending.
There was no positivity, no influence, no happy, no nothing on the other side of this journey. And now I get to talk about this journey full-fledged of going through it and living, and these experiences that you get, and the places you get to go, and the people. Like, man, it's beyond. Like a thing I learned too is that you can't let the gifts of recovery get in the way of the gifts of recovery. I can't get my life mixed up with it. Life is life, and what happened is I got me a life around here.
Well, Garet, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think your story really reminds people that, consistency, hard work, and action can really produce a beautiful life. And that recovery is possible no matter how, down the scale we've gone, right? No matter how bad things get, no matter how deep the bottom is, no matter how many times or how many years you've been incarcerated, or how many treatment centers you've been to, or how horrific your childhood was or wasn't, like recovery and having like a life worth living is entirely possible. And I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and all the different social media channels. And this episode was brought to you by Peak Path Health. Thank you.